Okay, we're on air.
Okay. Well, my name is Rich Higginson. I am the training director here at the Kansas City Woodworkers Guild, and I want to thank you all for coming out to our monthly skill builder on an absolutely gorgeous Kansas City day. I'm very excited about this month's program. Tom Vece is going to be showing us how he goes about making wooden mugs. And I don't know about you, but ever since I got into woodworking, I've been having all sorts of friends come by and say, hey, when you go make me a wooden mug? And I would say, well, when I learn how to do them. And so Tom is going to show us how to do them today. I do want to, before I turn it over to Tom, I want to invite you to the next month's woodwork skill builder. Next month, we're going to have Mike Blake. He is going to be showing how to flatten a slab using a router. And then the month after that, in May, we are going to have David Kratz, and he's going to come in and talk about what should you have in your toolkit. You know, what needs to be in your toolkit. So those are two exciting programs that are coming up. And without any further ado, I am going to turn this all over to Tom.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. This is my first skill builder, and so if you have a question, just raise your hand. Rich will bring you the microphone. I do not have any written instructions for this yet. Everything is in my head, so if it doesn't quite sound like I'm explaining it, feel free to just go ahead and ask. Okay, so as you can see, I made these. I wanted to have a interesting thing to give to my groomsmen for when I got married almost 4 years ago. And I scoured the internet looking at a bunch of different ways of making mugs. And this is the way that I found. I made a few modifications to it, but so this is my first series of mugs. And then I started playing around with the machines that'll kill you, you know, to make the nice Leichenberg designs, and filled it with epoxy, and decided I'm going to try to make that into a beer mug. And well, this was taller, but my son has the other half, so these are now whiskey tumblers. And this was actually my very first template. This is how I started right here in the guild, testing the angles and playing around with the width and how to put it together. So this one also has a brother. My son has it as a pen holder on his desk as well. So a lot of the cool stuff I end up doing, my son gets half of it or part of it. So without further ado, so you can make these out of any kind of wood that you want. This one's made out of spalted maple with a red oak handle. This is pine, and I don't remember what this one was made out of, but it has a cherry bottom on it. If I see something that I would like to try, I do. So I actually found this 1x12 in my shop, okay? And now it's in pieces. It's just jointed, planed, made it look like not that anymore. So I also ended up getting a bunch of scrap red oak in pieces like this, and now they're all cut down and everything. So I even played around with some whiskey barrel pieces. They're a little bit harder to work with because they're curved, and you don't get much out of these. I did, this one is just, I haven't planed down yet, but I really only got like 2 pieces out of that. The other, and it was thinner, it was not quite as thick. These other ones, I might be able to get some use out of it, but because of the curvature, I'll sit there, I'll probably cut that off and use it to make one of like these smaller ones. But in the past, I've used spalted maple, I've used walnut, I've used hackberry, red oak, just about anything that I have in my shop that I decide I want to go ahead and turn into beer mugs. So excuse me. So basically, once you get your board selected, once you joint it, you want to plane it down to a 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch has been my go-to thickness. I've had a few other times where I've been thicker, and it doesn't always quite, it doesn't go together as well. So the angle is 18 degrees, okay? 18 degrees on either side. Total it up equals 360. Yeah, had to do math there in my head for a second to make a perfect circle. So I freehanded my handle template, kind of just where I wanted it, looked good. And then I don't have an actual bottom because you actually have to trace the bottom with the mug itself. So I kind of go in a couple different things. I'll slide these out of the way so you can see. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go through this. So once I get my table saw set up, with it, actually you have to set it at 72 degrees because there is no 18-degree angle on a table saw. So once I get my angle cube out, set it at 72 degrees, I have my very first template piece that I use religiously. I go ahead and put that between the blade and the fence. And I just go ahead and that's my standard piece. And then I go ahead and proceed to cut it. Now, with wood like this, it's really simple. You push it through, and then the very first one, you actually have to take that one out, and you have to flip it this way and push it back through to get your angle on either side. But once you have that, like with the big pine piece, once you push it through, then you have to do a different turning to make sure that your angle is on this side like that constantly, because you're always cutting this side of the wood. And we'll probably, if there's enough interest in it, we'll go ahead and schedule a class probably in May or so, and we'll go through a lot more of the finer details. So without further, we'll go ahead and go. I do have a couple of, I glued these up yesterday. This one actually, before I got done, or before I did this, was actually a cedar fence post, or fence blank. I'm like, why not? Let's try it. You know, I'm game for using just about anything. But these two are red oak. And so what I'll do is I will go ahead and actually it works out perfectly. When I cut my board, I cut it at 24 inches. Okay. This gives me enough so that I can get a 7.5 inch piece, 7.5 inch piece, and then this is left over. And I used to cut that down and then I'd have like that long of a piece. But I decided I'm going to leave it long, and then I'm going to use these to cut into the my whiskey tumblers. You can put whatever flavor of beverage you want in there. I prefer whiskey and bourbon. So I'll get to where those are here in a second. Let me take this off because I'll need this. But once you're done cutting, I go ahead and set up a stop block on my miter saw at 7.5 inches. The reason why I do 7.5, it took me a couple times. This is taller than 7.5, and I realized that my spindle sander doesn't like that height because I couldn't get to the center. I had about that much I couldn't get. So I had to make it smaller. And that way I can spindle sand both ends without having that gap that I had to sand by hand with those, which was not fun. But so the other, like I said, I made some modifications in how I do this. The way I used to do it was when I tape it up, I'd put rubber bands on it. And I got tired of the rubber bands breaking all the time, so I thought hose clamps be a perfect thing. You can get them as tight as you want, and it works out a whole lot better. So, and I do have a couple different stages of mugs here, so I will go ahead and so this is right after glue up, and I'm actually going to go ahead and demonstrate how I do it. This one is sanded, but not completely, because the other thing I do is I make a mark on one side where I'm going to put the handle. And I do that so that when I go ahead and sand it and round it all off, I have one that is completely flat. Took me a minute to figure that one out too, so learn a lot from making mistakes. So, and then this one is ready to go on, and we'll go through that here in just a little bit. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Nope. Okay. So once I get all of my pieces cut, I take 10 of them, and the best way to do it is go ahead and get you a straight edge on the bottom here and clamp it down, because that way you can make sure that they are all flat. And then I use the wonderful blue painter's tape for taping them. So as I put it on there, and I make sure that it's flat enough against there, because every now and then you get some that move. Okay, that makes it so when you flip it over, you can, they'll all stay in place. And I leave a little tail on the end so that I can go ahead and close it, and that gives me enough time to get the pipe clamp on there without needing 6 hands. So hate when that happens. Yes, exactly. All right. Okay, so we got them taped down, and I just go ahead and flip it over, and oh, I need to get one more thing out of my bag. There we go. Okay, gotta have my glue spreader. So everybody's that's been through the basic woodworking course with Norm knows the Papa Bear, Baby Bear, Mama Bear gluing technique. On these, I tend to go a little bit glue heavy, only because I want to make sure all of my cracks are full. Because even when you're folding it over, you just want to make sure that they're all full, and that's what spreading it on the inside helps. So. Oh, Type Bond 3, they're not paying me, but this is what I use because it's waterproof-ish. So I'll go ahead and, are you going to do the upper? Put the glue in as we go down there. And what really takes a long time is actually prepping your wood. Getting it jointed and planed down to a 1/2 inch takes a lot of time if you're starting out with the 3/4 inch. So, let's go ahead. Oops. And then I'll take that squeeze out and use it on the side. Okay. And then if you have your angles really done well, they go together nice and perfect, like so. Like that. And then I'll go ahead and take my glue spreader, and from the one side, just coat that entire, all the seams, make sure that I got everything sealed up. I don't worry about the outside just yet, because I'll do that once I take the tape off. If I see any seams that might need a little bit extra glue, I will go ahead and do that. But you're gonna sand off the peaks of the mug itself, so sometimes they will just go away. All right. And that's how simple it really is to go ahead and, do 'em. Like I said, a lot of the prep work is takes the most time. Once I get the pieces cut, I can sit here. Before I got enough pipe clamps to do all of them, I had enough to do like 9 of these at a time. Then I bought more pipe clamps, so now I can knock out like probably about 20 of them if I have the wood. You have a question, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you
He has a
did
microphone.
those each did they come out of the same board, Tom? In other words, is it continuous grain all the way around?
So, no, this one is probably about, well, I get 3 pieces out of like I said, of 24-inch board. So I don't really, I just throw them in the bucket and then just grab them.
Okay.
What I will do, if I'm using pine, I will play around with the different kinds to see, I don't mind knots, so I try to, put them strategically located, and then just kind of, like this one doesn't have any knots in there, so. But no, as I'm putting them through the miter saw, I've got the bucket, I'm just like, cut, throw it in, slide it over, cut, throw it in, slide it over. And so I probably could try to do that, but once this is done, once I put the handle on there, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a torch and I will burn this, which gives it, just that interesting look to it. So while that's drying, what I will do is I will take my template for my handle and I will just draw it on a 1x4. I find that works pretty much the best because you don't waste a whole lot of wood. Now, if you want to use other kinds of wood, like I said, this one's just pine, but I've used red oak. I've used a couple other different species, but I just go ahead and draw this out. And for this particular one, like if I'm making handles multiple times, I'll just sit there and trace them on there, and then I will cut this out, give enough space, cut it out with my miter saw, take it over to the bandsaw, get it as close to the line as possible, and then I just go ahead and take it over to my belt sander, and then I sand it down to pretty close to where I want it, and then and once I get it there, I make sure I get all of the things. I will use the spindle sander to get this little curvature in there, and then I will take it over with a 1/4-inch round over, and I will round over the sides. And you can pass this around. You can see I don't go all the way to the edge so that it has a flat side to it, and it makes it a little bit easier to when I'm adhering to it, because the round over, like I said, I've done this quite a few times. It just seems like it makes it a little bit softer, or not softer, but makes it more flat. It gives a little bit more surface area. So when I cut that out, I will also, I've used various bottoms. I got to the point where it's like, when I'm doing pine, then I'll just go ahead and just stick with pine. This is red oak, I'll probably, if I've got the red oak large enough, I'll go ahead and use that for the bottom. But each individual mug, the handle is, you can do a template and go. But each individual mug will have its own unique little shape. You would think, oh, they're all the same. Trust me, I've tried to intermix, but it did not work. In fact, I already sanded that one off. This one has a number 7 on it because this was mug 7 out of 18, and I had to make sure that I kept them together. So again, a 1x4 works perfectly for this particular mug because it actually gives me 2 flat edges on the side, but I'll go ahead and trace it. Like so. Same thing, take it over to the bandsaw, chop it, take it over to the bandsaw, trim it down, and then I'll go ahead again, get it as close to where I want it. I will leave just a little bit extra on the bottom so that when I glue it up, I have a little bit of room to make sure I position it right. And I always try to, like when I make a mark on my mug, I also I make the same mark on the bottom so that I can line up where I started from. Again, that was one of the learning points that I had when I had like 6 different bottoms down there, and I was like trying to match up which ones went where. So it was a little bit of a guessing game. It's like, oh, I think this one goes here. Nope, it doesn't. So once we get once this is dry, I go ahead and I will glue the bottom on, and I'll clamp it down to the table, and I'll put like at least 2 clamps on there and let it dry. Now, this stuff dries pretty quick, but depending on what I'm doing or whatever, I might leave it overnight, just like these. These I glued up yesterday and left them overnight, just because I can. So let's it set and really dry good. So like these are ready to have bottoms on there. Like I said, this one had the bottom. I went ahead, like I said, I cut a little bit extra, so when I glue it on there, it's a little proud of the mug. And I do that so that I take it over to my sander, and I go ahead and sand it down to be flush with the mug, And when I'm doing that, I also take the sides down so it's a little bit more rounder. And I keep my mark here so I make sure I don't flatten those edges right there. That gives me the, straight piece to glue onto. Okay? So once I've got that done, I will go ahead and take it over to my drill press. And I bought the set where you can have the depth on there, but it also comes with the little markers, which this was another thing I tried relentlessly that it did not work. I tried to do like a template where it's like I just put it on there, make my circles and drill. It didn't work. So I went ahead and got this. So basically, and this has already got the holes, but oh crap. Go ahead and push you make your marks in there, and then, you have to drill this first. Sorry. I guess I jumped ahead of myself. I try to find center on these if I really want to be anal and really try to be precise. But this last batch, I just eyeballed it with my drill press. And in fact, rather than come down with the drill press, I go ahead and let it run, and I just move it up like this, because it lets me hold on to the handle on both sides so I can go straight up. I'll spin it around, go straight up. And then when I make the marks on the mug, I put the handle in there. So, and I hope I did not mix them up, because when I go to glue this one on here in just a second. Yep, this is the right one. Okay. Am I going too fast? Okay. Can all be done, and this part can all be done within a day or two, depending on how long you want to let your glue dry. So before I put my handle on there, I should mention that I go ahead and get my 45-inch chamfer, and I work my way up. I don't just get it to the height I want to and just start grinding away. I did that, was not pretty. So it takes a little longer when you're doing those. And it's, you set it on there and you just slowly turn it. And it's always, like I said, it's good to have that little mark on there. That's like the last thing I sand off. So as I'm going around, I know I've gone a full circle. Next, go do all that, and then I go ahead and crank it up a little bit more until I get to the height that I want. And then once I get all those done, I go ahead and I do a round over on the mug, and I'll sit there, and this is I guess I missed a step. Sorry. Go back. Once you have it like this, you have to take it to the spindle sander, and you have to get all the glue and everything out. So it's nice and smooth on the inside, as smooth as you can get it. The spindle sander here works great because it's got a tall enough spindle that you don't have to flip it on either side. But so once you get that nice and smooth, you do have to be careful, because as you're doing it on the spindle sander, trying to get all of your marks out, you can get a little thinner on one side or the other. That's just, you're trying to get that out so it's nice and smooth. So some of them have just a little thinner side. I try to be consistent with it. But anyway, so putting on the handle. I cut little pieces of dowel rod, which I forgot how big these are. I think these are 1/4 inch. And so I'll put glue in those here in a second. I used to use I had a bunch of these things left over from IKEA. They work out really well. You stick them in there, trim down what you don't want, but since this was like, I think I have like 2 left, so I had to go buy a dowel rod, which makes it a little better because that way you cut them to whatever size you want. Just what I do is I'll put it in there to see how deep I have it on one side, and then I kind of put it on the other. I usually make a little mark and then put it on the other side, kind of get a measurement of, okay, I need, it should be, keyword, should be that deep on both sides. But when you put them together, I always like to make it a little bit shorter so that it has a little bit of glue room and everything. So, and the other thing you have to be careful of, which I did with this particular mug, I don't know how I did it, but I actually went all the way through, which it's not going to be a big deal because once we get the handle on, I will go ahead and coat the inside with food grade epoxy. And I'll talk about that real quick. So I mix up small batches of the epoxy at a time, and I will go ahead and pour it in 2 or 3 mugs, and then you have to sit there and do get it to the edge, let it roll around, get it all the way over, make sure you got it all coated, set it down, do the next one, and then you come back to this one and you see all the epoxy has gone to the bottom, and you bring it back up, and then you go ahead and put a nice coat on it, and then once I get it to be coated all the way inside, if I remember to wear gloves, I will go ahead and do the top part here. Quite a few times I have forgotten. I'm just sitting there playing with it, and it's like, oh, I'll get that off later. And but this particular one has epoxy on the outside. It's messy. I quit doing that. I just go ahead and make sure that the inside has got epoxy on it. It is 100% waterproof. I've had many a beer in this mug, so have yet to have it spilled. I can't tell you how many glasses of whiskey I drank out of this one, but no spills. But okay, so when we're going to do the handle, and this, you have to switch to rubber bands because there isn't a pipe one big enough that I know of. So I'll put a little glue on there, kind of spread it around. And I'm not too worried if I have extra glue on there because when I do this side, I'll just put this one in first. When I do this side, I make sure that I get extra glue on the handle. And you can choose where you want the handle to go. Sometimes if you wanted it to be closer to the top or closer to the bottom, that's up to you. But this is where you need the extra hands. And that's common. That happens all the time. That's why my one on the bottom is not sticking. So when I get that on there, I try to apply the pressure in all the directions that's possible. Like for the bottom, I try to go so it's pulling it into the mug itself. And I will go ahead and let that dry overnight, just because it's, like I said, because I can. And then once it's like that, it's ready for epoxy. It's really, it's a quick, simple way to do it. Like I said, once I got done with all the prep, which that takes the longest, putting them together is really quick. I can sit here, I got 3 buckets full of parts, and I could just sit here while we're talking, put them together, and it's really not that difficult. You have any questions? He's got.
Have you made any where you have different woods in it?
Yes. Normally what I do is, let's see, 4. So I've got 3 cedar, 3 red oak, 4 pine. And I will just go ahead and alter them. Oop, I don't like that one. Sometimes you run into a piece like that. You can use that because you can fill that on the outside, but I'll grab another one. And if you have a really heavy smell of pickles, that's because I got that from Firehouse Subs. Okay. Oop. 9, 10. The beauty of this is that because you're cutting them all at the same angle, you can intermix the species as much as you want.
Another question is, when you are actually milling it up, do you mill the boards to the width you want and then cut the angles? Or do you take a wider board and...
No, I do. I take it to the width. I take it down to this 1/2 inch, and then I cut the angles.
Oh, but I mean for the, that other...
This distance right here?
Yeah, I mean, after you plane it down to a 1/2 inch, do you then rip it to the right width?
Yes.
Instead of making the angle and then cut them off?
Correct. I go ahead and, because when I'm putting it through the table saw, it's so much easier to have it the width you want, because as you're flipping the board and everything, especially when you're doing like this one right here, as I take it and I push it through the table saw, and then I make my flip and put it through and make my flip, and I keep going until I get down to the end. And with this particular, the 1x12, this I'll usually have a little bit that's just not usable. So like with like the red oak scraps that I have, I will only get one of these out of it just because, oh, actually I might be able, I don't know if I'll get two, probably not. So I'll have I'll have a lot of scrap left over, but I'll take that piece and stick it in a bucket and either burn it later, or I might come up with some other interesting thing to do with it. But does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to clarify, Tom.
Yes.
When you're cutting your boards, you cut them to width and at the angle at the same time. You don't
Correct.
cut- Yeah. you
Yes,
don't cut-
you're cutting the width and the angle at the same time.
And what width are you cutting?
It is 1 1/8 inches.
Inch and an eighth.
Yes. That, how I found that, it was just pure luck. So they're usually about 1 inch, but 1 inch, that little 1 1/8 inches makes it fit perfectly. So let me. Get
Any
that.
questions?
You have any more questions? I'll go ahead and glue this piece up real quick. John?
Have you made bowls?
I have not tried to make
Larger
bowls.
diameter?
No, I have not. That's a venture that I was going to attempt maybe at a later date, but I have not tried that yet. I did try, I have I got plans to make a lighthouse from Winfield Collection, and it has kind of the same concept with landscaping timbers, but I have not attempted that. But it's got pretty much the same idea. You have the right or the correct angle and everything, and it just makes a big circle.
You said you're epoxying the inside
Yes.
only now, Tom. What are you doing on the outside?
I use lacquer, just a gloss lacquer, just to give it a little bit of a shine. That's what this one is. So
Okay.
just epoxy on the inside, let it dry, and then I'll go ahead and just put the lacquer on the outside. And then I have my own brand, so I go ahead and brand all the bottoms, just so they know where they came from. So
Can you put hot liquids in there, coffee?
yes.
And what's the source for the food grade epoxy?
I've used a couple different ones. Total Boat is actually a food grade, and then I just ordered another one, was Super Clean. So as long as it says food grade on there, it's usable. So if you have like one brand over another, but I always make sure it says food grade.
I do segmented bowls, larger bowls, I guess, but straight-sided. And John, we always call him Scooter John. He runs a laser machine. He taught me about using the bird's mouth router bit. Are you familiar with the bird's mouth?
I'm not.
I think it might speed up your time. You take a flat board, a straight board, with 90-degree edge. Take it to the router with that bird's mouth router bit, and it just depends on which one you're using. They have them for 8, 12, 16. I think it's what it is. 8, might be a 10 in there as well. There's 3 router bits. One of them is interchangeable, but you just run that, and you don't set any angles or anything.
Okay.
And you only run it on one side. The other side is 90 degrees. And it goes together really slick, and it would probably it would take away your time on the table saw entirely, other than prepping the original board. But once you get that original board prepped and you have the straight corner, the straight 90 degree on one edge, then you just take that, well, you would run a bunch of strips
Well,
half inch, I mean, an inch and a quarter inch, I mean, inch and an eighth, whatever that you wanted. And then you take them over to the router table with the bird's mouth and just run them across and you're done.
And that gives you 360 degrees?
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, if you're going to do 8, then you do 8, the 8-sided piece, then you do 8 sides. If you do 10 sides, 12 sides, 16 sides, whatever. It comes together. You can buy each individual bit if you want to. He's posted up there. You see how that goes together?
I do.
And it is really slick. And
I've not heard of those. Thank
neither
you.
had I until John told me about them. That's one thing nice about the Guild. One tremendous advantage of coming to the Guild is you find out these kind of things from people who already have made the mistakes and found better ways to do things. So the bird's mouth, like I said, I think it would save you time in your cutting of your angles. Not only that, but there's no slippage. You don't have to worry. I mean, I don't even use a pipe clamp when I do mine. I just use a strap when I put mine on.
Yeah, the only reason why, like this batch that I did, that I cut out this week, has gone together really well. I've had a couple of times where, like I said, if I'm off by just a little bit on the thickness or the angle, just a hair, it has a tendency to be a little bit more challenging when you're putting them together. But this batch was, I was really happy with, because when I was putting them together yesterday, I was like, oh, ooh, yay. Did a little dance in the shop.
That's another thing nice about that bird's mouth. As long as all your pieces are the same width when you start, you run them on that tape on the router, they're all going to be exactly the right dimensions for you to be able to glue it up without any gaps.
I've had, like I said, there will be a little bit from time to time, but there's, I think a lot of it depends on if I take my time. The other thing I did fail to mention is that even though I put it flat up against there, I'll do it with this one. I bring it to my miter saw and I go ahead and I trim it down to 7 inches. I'll take just a little bit off, just to flatten that, so when I put my bottom on, it's nice and flat. And then, of course, when I go ahead and go over to the router with the chamfer, it spins on there nicely. So, but no, I mean, that in the time we were talking, I've put 2 together and got the handle on. The long pole in the tent, as we say in the Army, is your prep work, and then the epoxy at the end. It is time consuming, because you have to sit there and make sure it coats, and then, like I said, once you let it settle to the bottom, you start over again. Because I usually put maybe about a ½ ounce of epoxy in there. And if I put too much, then I just, as I'm spinning it, I look at it and be like, oh yeah, I got too much. Pour some into the next one and just keep on going. So now this one I'll cut in half and put bottoms on both sides. But yeah, that's about it. Does anybody have any more questions? Yep.
I noticed that you just glued them up. Do you normally dry fit the?
I used to. I don't anymore. I guess I've just kind of really got into the habit of, just, you can do a dry fit with the tape, but I just quit doing it, because it's like they go together so well. So, but it's not that, to say you probably should your first few times go ahead and make sure that they're all good. My son and I were doing some up in Iowa last month before, I think, and we were actually putting it together, and we went to dry fit it, and for some reason we had to add an extra piece, which was really weird because we've never had that happen. But I want to say we didn't get it quite down to the 1/2 inch. I think we were a little bit proud of that, so it didn't fit together the way it should. So by adding that 11th piece, it went together. So I haven't seen it since. I haven't been back up there to visit with them, but we're gonna do it. I will tell you this: if you are going to try something like this, you have to add an extra step, because you can't flip the board and keep the epoxy on the outside. So when you make your first cut, you have to, I'm trying to remember, I spent like 30 minutes going back and forth on this, but have to make another, to get you make your first cut, you take that piece, you put it through a second time, but then you have to take the board and cut off that angle, because it's the wrong angle if you're going to keep all of them on the outside. Like this particular one, this one right here, when this was my learning phase, there's actually the epoxy on the inside, because I made the cuts the way I normally did, and I was like, that's not right. And like I said, when I was doing this one, it took me a while to realize that I had to go ahead and straighten out that side, and then you're cutting each individual piece on both sides. But these are really fun to make. I've got 18 of these ready to go for my craft show at the end of the month. I honestly don't know how many I've got in there. I've probably got about at least 20 more in there to make, and I'll just keep doing it. So people seem to like them. I have sold a few. I haven't really been out there to show them off just yet, so I'll let you all know how it went the end of March. So, are there any other questions? That's about all I have. I mean, like I said, I find it's really simple. It took me a while to get it down to the point where I can just sit here and talk and do it. And I usually sitting in my shop, got the stereo blasting, and have my dog with me. He'll sit down there and so keep me company. All right.
Well, if there's no more questions, I'm not on this. Let me get
Nope, you can come on over here.
If there's no more questions, let's give a thanks to Tom for coming out. I have one more question before I let you all go. How many of you would be interested in having a class on making these things, if you were to offer a class like that? Okay, seems like there's some interest in that. We'll work on getting that for you. So, thank you again for coming out on this beautiful day, and I hope we'll see you next month.
All right, thanks for coming, guys.